of the violent protests that have ravaged Nepal this week. Prime Minister praying at the Pashupatinath temple, Hindutva-centric leadership, EG's first major foreign policy initiative, poverty, unemployment, inequalities, corruption, and misgovernance are a deadly mix.
The views expressed in this blog are hosted on my own website, are strictly personal, and do not reflect the views of any organization.
Namaskar. Hello and welcome, friends, once again to Straight Bat, my weekly video blog where, as the title suggests, I comment with a straight bat. Now, this may seem a distant memory to some, but recall that Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji's first major foreign policy initiative in 2014 was potentially a tactical and diplomatic masterstroke, inviting leaders of all the South Asian nations, including Pakistan, to his oath-taking ceremony. It signaled at a time a desire for India to act as a magnet for a wider South Asian regional unity. 11 years later, any hopes of a revival in the South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation, remember SARC as it was called, has evaporated as internal politics, nationalist fervor, economic distress, and mutual antagonisms have resurfaced in unimagined ways. In the process, the Modi government's much hyped neighborhood first sloganeering now lies, dare one say, in tatters. Take the latest example of the violent protests that have ravaged Nepal this week, a country beset with chronic instability for over a decade now. Since 2015, when a new constitution came into force in Kathmandu, Nepal has seen as many as 9 governments, with a 10th one now on the horizon. Poverty, unemployment, inequalities, corruption, and misgovernance are a deadly mix that have caused a volcanic eruption of mob fury that has singed the Himalayan Republic. New Delhi's foreign policy mandarins may not readily admit to this, but the scale and intensity of the protests led by the country's youth demographic has clearly caught the Modi government off guard in a way. It may again seem like a fading memory, but Nepal was the second foreign country, Bhutan was the first, where the now peripatetic Mr. Modi, much travelled Mr. Modi, visited Nepal as Prime Minister. The images then of the Prime Minister praying at the Pashupatinath temple had gone instantly viral. It was seen as a symbol of a Hindutva-centric leadership that was intent on retracing the deep religious, cultural, and civilizational roots between the two nations. Well, it didn't take long, my friends, for the well-choreographed photo ops and optics to give way to harsh realities on the ground. A 5-month unofficial blockade of the Indo-Nepal border in 2015-16 was seen by many Nepalese as a wrongful attempt by New Delhi to dictate terms to Kathmandu. It soured relations to the point where Nepal even attempted to redraw the map and extend their territorial claims across the border. The escalatory moves reflect just how Nepal's politicians have periodically fueled anti-India politics for their local cross-party support. In a sense, Nepal's Gen Z protests, as they are being called, mirror what unfolded to some extent in Bangladesh last July. If in Nepal a social media ban was the trigger point for the mobs to hit the streets, in Bangladesh, student anger against a reservation policy in civil services rapidly spilled onto the streets and eventually led to the ouster of the long-serving but increasingly authoritarian government of Sheikh Hasina. Like in Kathmandu, in Dhaka too, there was simmering public discontent against corruption and nepotism that transferred or transformed very quickly into a wider anti-elite, anti-establishment movement for change. Here again, the Modi government, which had invested considerable political equity in the Hasina government. We had almost put all our eggs in her Awami League basket, suddenly found itself on the back foot, not having foreseen the dramatic turn of events in Dhaka. The rise of radical Islamist forces with a strident anti India, even anti Hindu vocabulary at times meant that New Delhi was slowly trapped in its own ideological positioning. Did a government accused by its critics of pushing a Hindu majoritarian worldview really have the moral standing left to remind Bangladesh of the urgent need to restore secular values and protect the Hindu minority population there? Not surprisingly, more than a year since the 2024 uprising, New Delhi has struggled to reset its ties with Dhaka. The lingering presence of Sheikh Hasina on Indian soil has posed a further challenge to any attempt at rebuilding ties with a suspicious, if not hostile, neighbor. Let's now switch to Sri Lanka, another nation in the neighborhood which has seen much upheaval in recent times. Here too, a corrupted political establishment, when pitched against ballooning inflation, fuel shortages, and a deepening economic crisis, was forced to beat a hasty retreat. The Rajapaksa brothers, who seemed to be in absolute control at one time of the island nation, were literally pushed out into exile from the country almost overnight. Who can forget the images of the presidential palace being taken over by the citizen protesters? They were symbolic of just how even the most powerful regimes can be vulnerable at times to mass anger. Here, the Modi government, again initially blindsided, because Prime Minister Modi had built a strong personal equation with the Rajapaksa family, was at least able to recover a measure of the political saliency by stepping in quickly to financially assist a beleaguered economy. So we were to some extent able to repair our ties with Colombo. Now let's get it clear. India isn't directly responsible for the travails of a Nepal, a Bangladesh, or a Sri Lanka. But let's look at the diplomatic standoff with tiny Maldives, the lovely islands. A standoff in 2024 that was frankly entirely avoidable. Hyper nationalistic social media armies of the ruling BJP directed their ire then at the Maldivian government led by Mohammad Muizzu, almost pushing Malé to embrace a dangerous India out China in platform. While Muizzu's anti-India rhetoric was needless provocation, the call for a travel boycott of the Maldives led by celebrities and netizens was a worrying example of using social media to politicize sensitive foreign policy issues only to cater to jingoistic domestic constituencies in this country. The recent visit of the Prime Minister to Maldives suggests a welcome dialing down of the heat. But the friction that took place in 2024 is yet another reminder of just why India needs to avoid excessive bombast, even in dealing with the smallest of nations in the neighborhood. Which leaves one to address the more familiar and perennial enemy across the LOC. Undeniably, Pakistan's sponsoring of cross-border terror as an instrument of state policy has been primarily responsible for upending South Asian regional solidarity. The Modi government's approach to Islamabad has veered between unexpected bouts of dosti. You might recall the Modi Sharif Hug Fest, Jhappiyan and Pappiyan in Lahore in December 2015, to now an escalatory spiral of retaliation where every terror attack is likely to be treated as an act of war. Now, Pakistan is a seemingly irredeemable failed state that is unable to extricate itself from the army jihadi trap. But Pakistan's shenanigans cannot mask, my friends, the failure of New Delhi to build a coherent and inclusive South Asia policy that focuses on shared interests and thereby allows us to wield greater influence in the region. For a country which has ambitious plans of leading the global south, becoming a forceful voice on the global high table, this constant upheaval in the neighborhood poses a genuine challenge. More so, and listen carefully, because the dragon in the room in this region remains China, a country that continues to look for any opportunity to fish in troubled waters. Which is why India's claim to be a Vishwaguru or a global teacher needs an urgent reset. Instead of this overarching desire for Western world affirmation, how is the West looking at us? What we really need is to now keep a firm ear on the ground to also what is happening closer home. You see, neither being the big bully, as we are seen at times to be, nor the policy of benign neglect that we have followed in recent times towards some of our border nations are really a viable option anymore in an increasingly uncertain world. Nepal today, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka yesterday. Who knows, my friends, what tomorrow brings? As a postscript, it is one of the ironies that one of the strongest condemnations of the Pahalgam massacre in April came from Afghanistan's Taliban government, a regime that India doesn't formally recognize. Despite Kabul's strategic importance, it is not exactly the kind of friend India will feel comfortable with in a troubled region. So, if we truly want to be a Vishwaguru, let's learn how to win friends and influence people in our neighborhood. That's the challenge going ahead. That was the Straight Bat. Do, of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel for many more such videos. For now, stay well, stay safe. Jai Hind. Namaskar.